And we're live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Committee on Legislation, Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. Councilmember Farrelletto.
Here.
Councilmember Golumback.
Here.
Councilmember Nowakowski.
Here.
Councilmember Rivera.
Here.
Councilmember Scanlon.
Present.
Council President Pridgen.
Here.
Councilmember Bowman.
Present.
Councilmember Wyatt.
Here.
Quorum is present.
From the top.
Item number 1, tire handler license 1255 Bailey.
Items open.
This item is open. This is in Councilmember Bowman's district. I believe someone is here to speak on this item.
Yes, Ali Hamadeh should be here to speak on it, and I'll open it up for him to, tell us what he's doing and give us a little breakdown.
Ali, are you here?
If he's not here or not on, I did have discussions with Ali. He knows my expectations and standards I'm looking for. So if he doesn't have the opportunity to speak right now, I have been in discussions and had, we'll put some conditions. So at this point, you could do number 1 and 2, approve with conditions.
Motion to approve items 1 and 2 with conditions.
Seconded by Councilmember Scanlon.
Item number 3, traffic concerns.
This item was filed by Mr. DePasquale. Mr. DePasquale, are you here to speak? If I don't see the requested speaker on this call, so we will, we can table this item or hold this in abeyance in case the caller does join the meeting later.
Motion to hold in abeyance.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Item number 4, request to refuse to suspend vehicle registrations per City of Buffalo School Speed Zone camera program.
Items open.
Okay, so this item is open. We have several people here that want to speak on the school zone camera. So what we did 2 weeks ago, there were some items that were brought up, and Commissioner Helfer said that he wanted to come back in 2 weeks to address some of those. So what we're going to do now is give Commissioner Helfer and Commissioner Finn an opportunity to speak. Then we'll be moving to Erie County Clerk, Mickey Kearns, and then the rest of the speakers. So any item relating to school cameras will be discussed in this item here. So we'll go to Commissioner Helfer, Commissioner Finn, and then if any of the council members have questions, then we'll go to County Clerk Mickey Kearns, and then the rest of the speakers. So Commissioner Helfer or Finn.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'd like to thank your honorable body as well. I'll make an opening statement if that's all right. And then I got something from Malcolm with some questions from the council members, and I'll address those as well. All right?
Sounds good.
Today, I, along with several other people, are here to refute the unsupported and false allegations that the city's school zone safety program discriminates against any resident or particular community. Speed zone cameras are an effective tool that have been used in cities across the country to discourage speeding, promote safer driving, make roads more accessible to pedestrians and bicyclists, and encourage more equitable use of streets and sidewalks. Transportation equity experts, traffic engineers, public health officials, and professional urban planners who are actually engaged in designing streetscapes support these conclusions. Black residents in other communities of color where populations are dense and people prefer alternative forms of transportation will benefit the most from streets that no longer prioritize motorists, but encourage a wider array of safe transportation alternatives. Additionally, the idea that the administration should wait for an arbitrary number of people to be injured or killed before acting makes no sense to me, and is in fact the opposite of good governance, nor a reason to delay implementing sensible policy reforms that will make Buffalo a more progressive city. And while it's true that cameras alone will not achieve all the goals we have laid out, they have played an important role so far in slowing motorists down. The Mayor's Safe Street Initiative, announced last week, will make the cameras part of a larger strategy that brings together the administration's use of complete street design principles, the ongoing Slow Street Initiative, commitment to put dedicated funding into street striping and other traffic calming measures, and reducing the role of the police department in traffic enforcement. This holistic and comprehensive approach is the only way we can make our streets safer, more equitable, and capable of meeting the mobility demands of all our residents. Traffic safety reforms intended to protect us and our loved ones always meet resistance when they are first announced. From texting bans to seatbelt laws to motorcycle helmet requirements, there are always going to be people who find these requirements to be unfair or unjust. However, after the benefits of those other laws become apparent, the resistance to them disappears and people see that there is wisdom in obeying the law. I believe the same thing is happening here now. As a matter of fact, I know the same thing is happening here now. This program works. We can prove it works by data, and we can prove it works by looking out of our eyes and going down the street daily, which I do every single day. People have slowed down. Our streets are safer. Many of the people who are objecting to this program are doing so in bad faith, choosing highly selective data to create a narrative that falls apart under greater scrutiny. The conclusions that are being drawn have not been verified by actual experts in the field, the experiences of other cities, or the hundreds of published documents that are publicly available demonstrating the effectiveness of speed cameras in changing driver behavior and promoting greater safety. Accusations that the program violates any laws are simply false, and our program complies with the requirements outlined in the MUTCD, the New York State V&T law, and any other applicable legal requirement. Many of those objectors are part of the status quo that benefit the most from the way the roads are now and would not have anything changed if it meant another 30 seconds driving while they go from point A to point B. 30 seconds. If they were genuinely interested in traffic equity, they'd be calling for more speed cameras, faster implementations of street narrowing, the creation of more bus routes, and the installation of protected bike lanes. Instead, they're asking for the removal of an enforcement tool that is actually slowing drivers down and making streets safer for a wide variety of users. The mayor, the school superintendent, and traffic safety advocates here are committed to making streets safer, more usable, more equitable to every type of traveler, whether they are riding a bus, pedaling a bike, or walking on a sidewalk. False accusations of bias and discrimination meant to gaslight the public from the real issues involved will not dissuade us from this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Finn?
I don't have a statement. I'll just answer questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, so before we get to the other speakers, I wanted to see if any of my colleagues have any follow-up questions for Commissioner Helfer or Commissioner Finn, and then we will get into the rest of the speakers. Council Member Wyatt.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I think Council President, when he spoke, they were speaking against Mr. Rizzo's presentation, but I didn't hear anything other than words. You didn't give me any contrary information that what he's stating is not accurate. You referenced none of those things in there. It was just a statement. It's the same thing we've heard over the last several months. No documentation, no support, no information Mr. Rizzo went through and did point by point what to making his case. We have no contrary information to what Mr. Halford just said about it not being against. I mean, because I got one question. Who decided where these cameras went? Who was the consultant that decided where these cameras went?
I think that was Commissioner Finn's purview. Commissioner, who was the consultant that decided the locations with you?
A consultant did not decide the locations. City staff looked at crash data and traffic volume in accordance with the state legislation, which provided guidelines on how the cameras be placed. We shared that data with the council and placed those cameras. Then that's what the consultant did. The GATSO, the consultant and the vendor for this whole program, installed the cameras.
So GATSO was a consultant on the locations? The vendor?
Not ultimately, no. The data that Public Works used, crash data and traffic data, that came up with a list of locations where the cameras were to be placed. The consultant determined the exact final locations based on field conditions and what pole was appropriate, had 24/7 power. But the locations that were selected were done by data.
So, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Wyatt?
So
Sorry, I didn't mean to
wanna-
cut you off. I apologize.
No problem. You're the chair. No, I'm just trying to understand. So you're telling me the group that is benefiting from the percentage of tickets that are written were involved in the selection of the locations or part of the selection process of where the cameras went?
That's not an accurate statement. The vendor installed the cameras. The city, Public Works, with the information that we shared with the Common Council, determined the locations, the priorities for the locations based on risk data in accordance with the state legislation.
So if I go to the contract and the contract says that they will make the determination of the locations, are you telling me that's not true? That it says it in the contract?
I'm going to let Commissioner Helfer speak to that. That's his contract.
Gatso had nothing to do with this. I don't know where that question came from, to be honest.
Commissioner, that's not a question. I said it says it in the contract. So are you telling me that you didn't follow the contract where it says that they will select the locations? Are you telling me that that's not in the contract?
I do not believe that's in the contract. That you're telling me that you're saying that the contract between Gatso and the city of Buffalo says that they will select the locations. Is that what you're saying?
It's something in the contract that says that, and you're telling me it doesn't?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Finn expressed it very well. Based
okay,
on crash data, based on speed data. And when we presented to the council about 2 months ago, and we had our presentation in charts, we also incorporated 311 data over a 5-year period of people who have requested methods to slow people down and make safer streets. And when we overlay that 311 data over the areas of where the cameras are currently positioned, it aligns almost perfectly.
okay. So Mr. Chair, I'm just I'll let them speak further and others to speak. But again, we were expecting some information, data to contradict what they said was in Mr. Rizzo's information that was not valid. At this point, we heard nothing other than their words to say it's not true, it's not discriminatory, but no data to show us the contrary. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not disputing, I'm just saying that Mr. Rizzo did lay out the information where we can read it and understand, but the administration at this point, even in their opening statement, showed no data, no information that says to the contrary that his information is not valid. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would love to address that question, Mr. Chair, if I could.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I will be glad to, and I think we absolutely alluded to it in my opening statement about professional organizations, from National Highway Traffic Safety Advisory to many other professional organizations that have talked about the effectiveness and study after study concluding that speed cameras reduce speeding and crashes. I will be glad to present you all those, and I will file that with the Common Council. You want to get into that level of detail, I'll certainly get into that level of detail. What I will tell you on Mr. Rizzo's presentation, a lot of it was based on assumptions. And let me tell you why I say that. When a car goes through a camera enforced speed zone right now, what is picked up by the camera? It's picked up cannot take an image of a person. We know that. Picks up the license plate, picks up the make of the car. That is run through DMV data. DMV data then gives us the name of the registered owner of the car and the address. And if the ticket we deem valid, we send that out. That data does not, DMV data does not tell us race. It does not tell us income. So everything that Mr. Rizzo purported to speak to as fact last week was based on assumptions. I'm sure Mr. Kearns can speak to this. DMV data does not tell you race. It does not tell you income. So the cars that are going through these speed zones, to conclude that somehow it is disproportionately affecting people of color and people of lower income when you don't have that data is impossible.
Okay, so we're gonna go on to the speakers. And so what we'll do, everyone will have an opportunity to speak 3 minutes for each speaker. And then at the end, we'll wrap it up with any responses from the commissioners or any follow-up questions from the council. And our next speaker will be Erie County Clerk, Michael Kearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Buffalo Common Council. I know I have a short period of time. I drafted a letter that I filed with that your honorable body. And basically, I'm just going to read one part of it. Is what I find troubling as the clerk of the courts and the county's agent for the commissioner of motor vehicles is the method the city of Buffalo is using to collect these unjust fines. On the face of each notice of liability, there is a paragraph which states the following: warning, failure to pay the penalty shown or to consent liability described in the next paragraph is an admission of liability. It may result in the refusal or suspension of the motor vehicle registration. As the agent for the court, I find this language troubling because the Governor Cuomo signed the Driver's License Suspension Reform Act on New Year's Eve, which ended the practice of suspending a person's driver's license when the individual cannot afford to pay a fine. So these are dire consequences that if I have people coming into the Auto Bureau at a later point in time, what I'm concerned about is if the city of Buffalo then goes forward and issues a default judgment, which will be filed in the clerk's office, that judgment will go with the property, meaning it's not up to the standard of a foreclosable action. But if someone does get one of these tickets, they don't show up, they don't go through the process, and they file that default judgment with the clerk's office, that would stay with the homeowner's record. In addition to that, I'm just waiting. I did receive notice back from the commissioner that he did receive the letter and they are reviewing it, but I have not gotten a final response back from the commissioner. And finally, I know in Iowa, the Supreme Court in Iowa, there is a class action in the city of Des Moines. I'm concerned about the constitutionality on that, and my office is doing a legal review. So with that, I thank this honorable body for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I just will close with this. Some of the council members who are co-sponsors of Complete Streets legislation, I do think that there are other ways to slow traffic down, to make school zones safer without using cameras. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner, we're going to have all Helfer. Thank you, County Clerk. Commissioner Helfer, we're going to go to all the speakers and then give you an opportunity at the end to respond. Diane, you are up.
Thank you. My name is Diane Elzey, and I live in North Buffalo on Huntington Avenue. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today. I am here to speak against the speed zone cameras, and my comments are influenced by the fact that I am a social worker guided by the ethical principles and standards of my profession. And I have to say that I am not here in bad faith today. And I feel quite insulted by Commissioner Helfer's comments, I have to say. I care about the safety of children, and that's also one of the reasons why I'm here. School zones must be safe for children. However, speed zone cameras are not the solution in a city with 38% of our children living in poverty. The US Census Bureau issued that figure this past December. Families in Buffalo are suffering economically and in many other ways from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's immoral to impose speed cameras on a city with 38% of our children living in poverty. Funding infrastructure improvements and design interventions to calm traffic and make our streets safer should not be funded by a punitive speed camera program that extracts money from Buffalo residents who are already struggling to survive. And there are data circulating that the cameras disproportionately target low-income and Black and brown neighborhoods in Buffalo. I would ask the esteemed members of this body to look into that even further. I think this immoral money grab must end. The city has long underinvested in infrastructure improvements and overinvested in policing. We need equitable solutions to create safer streets that will promote community safety and not further impoverish Buffalo's residents. And I know people have lots of ideas for those design improvements, those infrastructure improvements that would calm traffic. So thank you very much for, again, the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Colleen?
Hello, my name is Colleen Christich, and I'm a community researcher at the Partnership for the Public Good. At the last legislation committee meeting, Peter Rizzo presented his research on the school zone speed camera program and found many problems. I'm here because I appreciate that there's a difficulty in this issue because we do all want children to be safe, and just remove the cameras without making other changes might jeopardize children's safety. So when I saw his research, I wondered if the cameras were removed, what specific changes could be made in each of these zones to calm traffic and keep kids safe. So I took a closer look at his research and was able to separate the 20 school zones that have cameras into 4 categories. There's high crash, high volume zones, high crash, low volume, low crash, high volume, and low crash, low volume. So high crash means there's more than 10 crashes per year, and high volume means there's more than 15,000 cars passing per day in that school zone. High crash, high volume zones obviously pose the highest risk to students, and low crash, low volume zones would have the lowest risk. So based on this analysis, there's 4 zones that currently have cameras that are high risk, that have high volume and high crashes. And 8 of these zones that have cameras I would consider low risk because there's low volume, low number of crashes. And the other 8 school zones that have cameras are somewhere in between. So for example, one of the highest risk schools is St. Joseph's University School on Main Street, which has almost 13 crashes a year and nearly 27,000 cars pass per day. In contrast, Bennett Park Montessori on Clinton Street has only 2 crashes per year and around 3,000 cars pass per day. So that's a difference of 6 times as many crashes and 9 times as much traffic at St. Joe's compared to Bennett Park. So not only are there very different traffic patterns at these schools, the street itself is different too. Bennett Park Montessori is on a pretty quiet section of Clinton Street. It's 2 lanes, it's residential, it's across from a park, and that's the type of place where speed bumps would make a lot of sense. But it doesn't have any speed bumps or very much design infrastructure at all, but it does have a speed camera. St. Joseph's, which is very different, that could be a location where we could put in rumble strips, pedestrian refuge, curb extensions, or other physical or visual improvements. And I feel strongly that both are in need of design changes before an enforcement strategy. Those are just 2 examples of the very different needs and considerations of each of these school zones, and the one-size-fits-all approach of slapping up a speed camera doesn't make sense, especially if the zone is lacking basic street infrastructure. So I'm asking that the council should end the current speed camera demonstration program and look at each school zone one by one to understand the options and needs of each zone based on publicly available traffic and crash data, and through consulting with the parents and community members who live in each zone, which I know many parent groups have been asking for that one by one look and individual input on their school zone. So knowing that each school zone has different traffic patterns, different neighborhoods, and different design needs means that each zone must be considered individually, and a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work for Buffalo.
Thank you, Colleen, for your comments. Next, James Giles.
Good afternoon, and I thank all of you for certainly conducting such a meeting. I want to be very brief. Aside from all the politics in this, that's you all's arena, but I'm looking at this from being out on some of those corners. I've been out there. If we don't begin to do something to slow people down, I had just for the Promise neighborhood, for example, they had safety watch people that would not go out there anymore. The peacemakers came in and filled in for that particular year because people speed down Bailey. It's just crazy, even during heavy traffic. So much so that emergency vehicles can't get through because of the jams that are created by the volume of traffic on Bailey, for example. Over there by Stanley Mikowski, one of my peacemakers got a ticket. I said, well, you got right. Then you should have, because you know better. You've been out there on the street to see these crazy drivers that we have here in the city of Buffalo and other spaces that come through Buffalo. You've seen how they drive. And if we don't begin to do something to slow them down, and I kind of like what Colleen is saying. So if not cameras, what? Then get some speed bumps or something out there to slow traffic down. I've been to 5 funerals from crashes that have happened in this city. 5 of them. The young man got his leg cut off innocent. He a pedestrian from a crash that took place. This is how people drive. Also, we have an inordinate number of stolen vehicles that are happening now with our young people. And Captain Ronaldo can kind of attest to that. So it picks them up as well, because all they know is speed, and they don't care what zone they're in. Now, if we don't do something to begin to slow drivers down, if you want to take the cameras out, then what are you going to put in there? That's my question. How are we going to slow these people down? Our children, and we have been out there and we have been almost hit several times, particularly around Bailey Avenue, people dropping students off at Mikowski, right? When they open the door, there are people speeding through there, right? Speeding through there, almost hitting the driver. They can't even open their doors. If we don't begin to do something, right, this is going to come back to curse us. I'm hoping we make some kind of decision about installing something in there to slow. This is about slowing drivers down, people. That ultimately is going to save some life, man. I don't care what it is that your political philosophy is about this stuff, but if we have to slow people down, right? They're killing each other with this speed. And I quality the cap, I wish it was on several of our side streets. We have so many people, our seniors don't even want to, afraid to cross the street in some of our side streets because of the constant speeding in this city. Now, it's a bigger problem than just what's happening around the schools. But that's a start, right? At least you can capture the information so that so that law enforcement can have a chance to investigate what's going on if something tragic happened and they leave the doggone scene. I just look at it from a very safety point of view. And I think that cameras is a start, and I would not be against that unless you had some alternative that's going to slow drivers down. And I don't care if it's speed bump, every 50 yards a speed bump. Something's got to slow these drivers down. That's my piece.
Thank you, Pastor Giles. Next, we have Jalonda Hill.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I won't be on camera today. So I'm here representing first myself as a all seasons cyclist who uses the roads of the city of Buffalo to cycle and bike almost everywhere. And I'm also here representing the Fair Fines and Fees Coalition and a group called Colored Girls Bike Too. And I'm here today because I know firsthand as a cyclist what it's like to drive on the dangerous streets of Buffalo. So I've had my foot ran over before on the streets of Buffalo. I've almost nearly died on the streets of Buffalo as a cyclist because of this lack of investment in protected bike lanes, speed bumps, all of the different traffic calming infrastructure that clearly the city of Buffalo knows about. I mean, they clearly have experts on their team that do the research. That's how the Safe Streets Initiative came about. But yet, knowing this infrastructure has not been invested into, right? So right now, there's only $37,000 set aside for striping. And I look at that number and I'm just very disappointed. And it kind of speaks to how the city of Buffalo sees safety in our community, right? Like they won't invest money, but they'll put cameras in to extract money. And then, disguise it as, oh, well, it's for the safety of our children and it's for the safety of our streets. Well, if it's for the safety of our streets, why was another cyclist killed, right, in June on Bailey Avenue, the same street that Pastor Giles was just talking about, if it's all about safety? The thing is, like, there has been an outcry for investment in our infrastructure for years, right? There have been so many deaths. So there have been 4 fatal accidents on Bailey Avenue between 2014 and 2019. And just another cyclist was killed in June. And so having all of this data and seeing all of this and knowing that traffic violence is real in Buffalo, I just don't understand why the investment has not already happened. And instead of investing in traffic calming infrastructure, the city immediately decides to just institute, speed cameras as a way to keep our streets safe. So with that being said, what we're going to continue to ask for is investment in traffic calming infrastructure. So not prioritizing the Safe Streets Initiative, but prioritizing just streets, because just streets center those who have often been excluded from transportation decisions, who are disproportionately impacted by things like cameras and police, and who live in communities that have been divested for decades. So I'm here asking for the elimination of the camera program and instead to invest in traffic calming infrastructure. And until that's done, I think there needs to really be a pause and an elimination of this speed zone camera program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next up is Justin Booth from Go Bike Buffalo.
Thank you, council member, and thank you all for continuing to discuss safety around our schools and school zones. This isn't the first time I've talked to you all about our school safety zone program. And I think it's important to recognize that not only am I a resident in the city, but also a father of 2 children who went to Bennett Park Montessori and who I spent the last 15 years riding my bicycle with them to school every single day, and experience the consistent challenges that faces at only a 1 mile distance going from the west side of downtown to the east side of downtown. Working with the parent groups in the community around Bennett Park Montessori, working with Council President Pridgen, there's now been an investment of over $1 million in improving the infrastructure around Bennett Park Montessori. There's going to be, in the next construction season, as Mike Finn had talked about previously, there's going to be bike lanes, there's going to be bump outs at the intersections, reducing crossing distances, and really moving the corridor in line to ensure that drivers are following the 15-mile-per-hour speed limit. What we know, and when you're looking at infrastructure and street design, is that when you don't have streets that are designed for safety, 80% of the drivers are likely to go above the speed limit. Yet when you design it for safety, you get 80% of drivers who will follow the speed limit. There will always be 20% of the drivers who will not follow the speed limit, regardless of what design features we put in place. So it is essential for us to look at all the tools in our toolbox when we look at making sure that our communities are safe, that our students are safe getting to school, and that we can effectively build that quality of life that we so desire in our city. So Go Bike has consistently provided recommendations to the administration on the program and to the council on the program, because we recognize that motor vehicle traffic injuries are the leading cause of injury-related deaths in Erie County, with speeding being the second leading cause of crashes, according to the New York State Department of Health. And children under the age of 18 are disproportionately hit by people driving cars in the city of Buffalo, having been in over 1/4 of all motor vehicle crashes with people walking and riding bikes, according to the University of Buffalo. So I want to reinforce that we as a community must go beyond the traditional approach of simply targeting individual behavior through law enforcement, ticketing, fines, and fees. The movement by the mayor's office to create the Safe Streets program initiative is a great step in that direction. But while enforcement plays a role to truly be effective, the city must work to impact underlying systems and environment that influences behavior at the individual level. This includes a comprehensive look at all street designs, policies, and procedures in the city of Buffalo to prioritize safety and access for all populations. Our recommendations have been consistent. Identify the city's most dangerous streets and intersections for people walking, bicycling, and driving around school zones through data analysis, and make sure that this data is provided transparently to the public. Share this information through substantive community outreach to ensure awareness of speed-related dangers and create community-centered solutions for comprehensive safety strategies and interventions. So we must look at the data. We must use education in our communities. We need to target revenue to redesign the streets to encourage safe speeds, prioritizing investment in the communities most at risk for crashes, and specifically communities with lower median incomes and communities of color. To ensure that it's not having a disproportionate impact on certain communities, we should create options to tier fines based upon family income and the ability to pay, and to let first-time offenders take driver safety education classes or conduct community safety service in lieu of a monetary fine. There needs to be options so we don't continue the cycle of poverty. And we need to continue to track and monitor placement and enforcement of the school zone safety cameras and enforcement to ensure these mechanisms are not having an undue or disparate impact on populations who are economically vulnerable and or overrepresented within the criminal justice system. So managing speeds to save lives and eliminate life-altering injuries is critical to our children's future, our city's quality of life, and our shared economic vitality. A full systems approach that is designed to protect people will be more effective in achieving this than any single approach on its own. We must make sure that all the tools are available to us. I think it's also important to recognize.
As your 3 minutes are, if you can just wrap up with your conclusions as your 3 minutes are up.
Yes, so it's important to recognize though that the investment around Bennett Park Montessori School was about $1 million. Looking at what other cities have done, that investment around each school to make sure that the speed zones are safer on each school is going to be roughly $1 million for every school zone in the city, which is there are over 60. This is over a $60 million investment that the city needs to make sure all our streets are safe. And I hope before we start eliminating the tools that we have available to us, that we take a comprehensive look of how we can accomplish this collectively as a community.
Thank you for your comments. Victoria Ross.
Good to be here. Thank you. So I want to say I am very much reminded of Ferguson and the surrounding area, where it was documented after the killing of Michael Brown, how much the city and the suburbs were relying on fines that went to Black and brown people to support the city's, this suburbs budget. It was the vast majority of the money for the city was coming in exorbitantly through this cash grab that was on the backs of Black and brown people. And I have to say, this is a lot of what the speed camera look like. The speed zones are predominantly in neighborhoods of color, and that is an unjust situation. There are other ways. They've also been dysfunctional. There have been errors made. And I think we all know of different times, we think that technology and mechanisms are reliable, but what we see is, of course, a lot of times they're not reliable. We just saw that with the rollout of this plan. There's everything that makes this look like a cash grab, and a lot of it to the benefit also of the company that's going to cash in, as well as the city that's planning to cash in, with only putting a fraction of that back into the neighborhoods. There are other better ways that will last longer and do less damage to the people who are least able to afford it, and especially right now in the COVID. So there's all kinds of differences in our city why this is not a good solution for our city. We can do other things. We can, and one of them would start with an public awareness and information campaign, which can be easily done, and lots of people would have plenty of incentive for doing that. That can be for free. You know, there's a lot of ways to approach this. And Just Streets, I should say, and I think I didn't, I'm speaking for the Western New York Peace Center. We are very excited about the Just Streets program, because there's all kinds of ways that our injustices in this city need to be changed, and this would be one of them. So it will really create a beloved community, to use infrastructure, use increased public awareness, use speed bumps and all kinds of other small modifications that will help remind people to slow down. We can slow down, and we can slow each other down. So we can work together to make that happen without, and not do it on the backs of Black and brown people. So I hope, and I urge the council to consider that, and to abolish the speed cameras. Thank you. Now you're on mute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria. Dr. Crestes from the Buffalo Public Schools.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of this body. We appreciate all that the Common Council does on behalf of our students and parents. And to be clear, we are trying to not put ourselves on opposite sides of any issues here related to speed zone cameras. We're fully aware of the Common Council's commitment to Buffalo's children. We also know that your record over the years has been clear when it comes to putting the safety of children as a top priority for your work. Having known most of you for many years now, I certainly have faith in your commitment to keep students safe as they travel to and from their school buildings. But we are also aware that you are facing unprecedented pressure from civic organizations and individuals. Some of those organizations were previously respected champions of traffic calming in Buffalo because they knew we have many irresponsible drivers, not just from Buffalo, but from throughout Western New York, who travel through our city recklessly on a daily basis. These groups have now reversed their priorities in our view, and are advocating for the removal of speed zone cameras. It's an upside down either or narrative you are being asked to believe. Please don't believe it. We can do two things at once: create safer infrastructure and enforce speeding laws to keep our children safe today. And again, while we do not question any council member's commitment to the safety of Buffalo's children, we do ask that you be mindful of the impact of any ill-considered decision, the tragedy of which we would all have to live with for the rest of our lives. And as we know from experience, unfortunately, groups and individuals putting pressure on you will be nowhere to be found when that tragedy strikes. The Buffalo Public Schools does request in the strongest of terms that speed zone cameras remain in place. Let's discuss any opportunities for improvement, as we've been doing all along, like equitable tiered fine structures that consider ability to pay, dedicated funds for infrastructure, as Mayor Brown has already discussed and proposed. So it's not an either or. We can do more than one thing at a time, and there are always opportunities to improve anything. We will stand with you as we try to do so. But please don't compromise your long and distinguished records of standing up for children by making any ill-considered decisions in the face of pressure from people who will run the minute tragedy strikes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I just have one quick question for you, Dr. Kresge, before we move to the next speaker. We asked this a few months ago, but I don't know that we got there. How many of the 20 school zones that have cameras now are located at community schools?
I don't have that information with me, but I will definitely get that to you, Councilmember Farrelletto. Unless one of the commissioners has it, they may know.
Yeah, I know this came up a few months ago and you shared all the locations of the community schools with the other commissioners. I didn't know if you guys had any input on putting them where more students walk.
No, we didn't have any input on the actual decision-making of where the cameras would go. We were shown the same data that you were shown, which is this is the school sites that have had the greatest incidence of dangerous accidents or pedestrian events. So no, we were not involved in the decision-making. The district was shown the same information that you were shown.
Thank you.
And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but we would not be in a position to make those decisions. We wanted to follow the data just as the city did in placing those cameras where they did.
I completely understand. I was just wondering, because I know a few months ago we were talking about the wonderful job the Buffalo Public Schools have been doing with the community schools. And we were talking about if there were any cameras located where there are the most walkers. So that's why I was just following up on that. Next speaker, we have Peter Rizzo.
Thank you very much. During the February 9th Legislation Committee meeting, Council President Pridgen asked Commissioners Finn and Helfer to meet with me over Zoom to discuss the information that I presented 2 weeks ago. Although I sent an email to both gentlemen on this topic, no meeting invitation was ever extended. Instead, the city resorted to making gratuitous false statements about my professional experience, qualifications, and credentials. Now, as an auditor and fraud examiner, in addition to my certification as an urban planner, well experienced, mind you, this is not uncommon when you expose the truth. But the moment you resort to attacking the messenger and not the message, you've lost the debate. As we discussed last week, Buffalo is one of the poorest cities in the United States of America. Our residents cannot afford a punitive enforcement program ostensibly designed to calm traffic when countless actual traffic calming alternatives exist and are within grasp. And the truth remains that this program is truly not about child safety. It's about revenue generation. Today, Commissioner Helfer asserted that my findings concluded somehow that speed cameras have the ability to discern the ethnicity or race of a driver. This is an outrageous proposition and completely false. I performed a spatial analysis that examined where the city placed the cameras, specifically where Sensei Gatso placed them, by the way. And they were predominantly placed in minority neighborhoods. Numerous professionals have examined my analysis and validated my findings, including Professor Henry Louis Taylor Jr. of the University at Buffalo Planning Department. What we didn't discuss last week, however, was the city's speed camera request for proposals. That document was issued on July 30th, 2018. Excuse me. If this program were truly about child safety, then it's only fair to assume that the city believed in July 2018 that school zones were unsafe for children. They wouldn't have issued the RFP otherwise. But here's the problem. 18 months passed from the date of the RFP to the day the first cameras were installed. During that time, the city did nothing to protect our children, such as install non-punitive traffic calming measures starting in the summer of 2018. Instead, they waited until January 2020. In addition, page 10 of the city's speed camera RFP granted the successful bidder, Sensei Gatso, authority to decide which Buffalo schools received speed cameras. Read it for yourself, it's right in there. That certainly would explain why speed cameras were installed in high traffic school zones and not in high crash school zones. On page 14 of the RFP, that requires the successful bidder to manage all press and public education efforts related to the speed camera program. In other words, the foreign-owned, for-profit company that pockets 28% of every speed camera violation controlled the city's messaging on the new speed camera program. They may have also had a hand in deciding when information came before this common council. And school zones are apparently just the beginning for Buffalo's speed camera empire. On page 8 of the RFP, it says that pending the passage of future state legislation, the city may expand its speed camera program to other areas of Buffalo beyond just school zones. We can't afford to wait for this to happen. It's imperative that the Common Council take swift legislative action to immediately terminate the speed camera demonstration program as it exists today. If anything, the council is the governing body that should decide whether Buffalo has speed cameras, and each council member should have the ability to choose whether speed cameras are installed in their district or not, based on the data. In addition, the council should legislate a requirement for universal school cross-zone crosswalk striping rather. The posting of proper signage legally, which they're not currently posted legally according to the city code. And most importantly, the use of non-punitive traffic calming measures that will have a far greater impact on school zone safety than any speed camera possibly could. The council should also demand an investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and an audit by the New York State Comptroller. If the city cared about protecting children, it wouldn't have waited 18 months to take action. It wouldn't have installed speed limit signs too close to schools. It would not have instituted a punitive traffic calming program when so many children in Buffalo live below the poverty line. You know, for under $50, you can buy a winter coat, hat, gloves, and boots for a child. And yet countless children in Buffalo are without proper winter clothing. If a family can't afford a warm winter coat for their child, for their son or daughter, you know, how are they going to afford to pay a $50 fine? Folks, God has given each of us the talents and skills that have brought us here today. We're called upon to apply our knowledge and our abilities to do his work and to put the needs of the poor and vulnerable first. I'm not here to pick a fight with the city and not here to pick a fight with the school district. I love this city and I want what's best for its people, as we all do. Please do the right thing and put a stop to this predatory enforcement program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Peter Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Black History Month, and Black history in this country is often the story of amazing accomplishments achieved in the face of injustice. So I'd like to talk about injustice in Buffalo government today. It is injustice for one of the poorest cities in the country to push through programs which target the pocketbooks of the poor and minorities during a global pandemic. This honorable body should not tolerate that. It is injustice for the mayor of Buffalo to unilaterally initiate an automated speed enforcement program without the full consent and collaboration of this honorable body. I have found no evidence that the Common Council ever formally authorized the present automated speed ticket demonstration program, approved the final contract with the vendor Census Gatso, or designated any city school speed zones as required by the charter. Is it injustice for the mayor, for his commissioners or school officials to personally attack community advocates who step forward to analyze and criticize unjust revenue generating programs which target our poorest citizens? It is unjust for the city to support a fake hearing process for parking tickets and or automated speeding violations where the judge and the prosecutor are the same person hired by a commissioner whose job depends on fining people and generating revenues. It is an injustice for the city to collect fines using statute violating incomplete speeding citations, which do not have the camera ID displayed or other necessary items as required by law. Please see the sample document I provided you today. The camera ID is not where it is supposed to be, but purportedly concealed at the bottom of a picture in a type font 2 illegally small to be read by humans. All fines which have been previously collected with respect to such citations should be immediately returned. It is an injustice for commissioners who are not lawyers to come before this body and misquote and misinterpret laws which they neither cite nor understand. This honorable body should not tolerate that sort of behavior. It is injustice for the city to hold its real property tax rate artificially low for years and then attempt to make up for the inevitable revenue shortfalls which result by grinding out fines and fees from our poorest citizens. This body should not tolerate that. It is an injustice for the Corporation Council of the city to lose sight of the fact that he is the attorney for all the citizens of Buffalo and not the personal lawyer of the mayor. It is an injustice for a common council member to ask a clear question of Corporation Council and receive in return evasive, inaccurate, and city damaging responses. This body should notify Corporation Council that he has evidenced a manifest conflict of interest in his representation of the mayor over the council and demand that he provide from his own budget sufficient funds for the council to retain competent outside counsel to represent the interests of the city of Buffalo. I believe you should end this ridiculous, unworkable speed zone camera now and clean up the kangaroo court which exists at the Parking Violations Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone here to speak who has not had the opportunity to speak yet? Okay, since there haven't, there's some questions that I had for the commissioners. Did you want to do did you guys want to respond to anything that's been brought up, or can we resume with some questions? Commissioner Helfer, Finn.
I was just trying to unmute. No, you can go ahead with your questions.
Okay, I had a question. I don't know if you have that or if you could provide it to us. I know I brought up earlier about the community schools, and that was brought up a few months ago with it. Do you know how many of the 20 cameras are located at community schools?
No, you honestly, I don't believe you addressed that question to me. I thought you addressed that to the Board of Ed a month or so ago, but I'll certainly find it if you would like.
Okay, that's the question I had. Do any colleagues, I'll open it up to any questions from my colleagues. Councilmember Wyatt.
Mr. Chair, I just would like Mr. Rizzo to repeat the piece in the RFP or the contract that states that GATSCO will make the selection for where the cameras were to go. I believe he spoke to that in his presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Rizzo, did you have the specific part of the RFP Councilmember Wyatt would like to know?
Yeah, let me just pull it up for here.
Can you print it, please?
So are we talking about the site selection criteria, Councilmember Wyatt?
Yeah, he was talking about
Site selection.
Yep,
About that, yes.
it's on page 11, it's on page 10 of the RFP. It says site selection criteria. The successful offeror will be required to develop specific criteria that can be used to evaluate designated zones considered for improvement via the introduction of an automated, of an ASE system, speed camera system. This criteria should take into consideration traffic volumes, citation history, accident rates, pedestrian knockdown rates, speed analyses, traffic patterns, roadway geometry, and other factors that would affect the effectiveness of the speed camera system. So we're putting it on the shoulders of the contractor, the vendor, to decide the parameters for selecting a location for the cameras. Therein lies the problem, when they have a enormous stake in making money off of this program.
So
Thank you. Councilmember Wyatt?
So, Mr. Chair, I ask that we have provided the information and the parties who were involved in the decision-making. Since they said they had a committee that did this, then that committee should have some minutes and information for us, because in the contract, in the RFP, it clearly states that the vendor shall make that decision. And so I'm trying to understand, and I guess we need our corporation counsel to speak on this item, is how did we make a decision that it says clearly in the RFP that they would be making? Isn't that a violation of the agreement?
Assistant Corporation. I'm sorry, Assistant Corporation Counsel Karen Gordon. I'm not looking at the RFP, but what I can tell you at this moment, I believe that it depends on how you interpret that. From my understanding, when the contract was drafted, and based on the state law that was approved for the city of Buffalo, our department was given the task of gathering the information regarding crash data and other forms of data in the area to be used to determine where the cameras would be placed. That was something that was written in the state legislation that gave us the authority to actually place the cameras. Now, if the RFP suggests or says, as the gentleman says it does, that the company is to be or have the information, the ability to place these cameras, I do believe that an RFP also clearly states that it would be based on these sets of criteria that would be provided by our city department. So if the commissioner, according to the state law, did get those crash data and other information collected by the city of Buffalo and presented it to GASCO, then I believe that is how they would have made a final determination as to where those cameras were to be placed based on information that was provided by us. But as I said, I don't have the RFP in front of me. I've never seen or looked at the RFP, but that would be my interpretation. Thank you.
But however, Mr. Chair, to speak, and I'm here what Ms. Gordon is saying, but I believe what I read, and if it's in the RFP, you assume that it's accurate. I think Mr. Rizzo made the statement that it seems as though that the cameras were placed in high count areas, which it seems to show. I mean, they have a camera on Bailey Avenue, which has no school. It has a daycare, but not a school. And then you have the other locations on Delaware and Main Street. Those are high count areas. So again, we question the validity of what we're hearing, but we know what we read, and we know that the contract says that they shall make the decision. But then we're told and not given the information or documentation to prove that there was a committee meeting, because in the very beginning, this council member asked that the council was involved in it. That was never accepted. It was never, no one ever came back to us and said, hey, we're going to make these decisions. What your thoughts are? You made unilateral decisions that we just accepted. And when we came out with questions, we were, dismissed. So again, what we read and what we see seems as though that Mr. Rizzo's point is well made, that it seems as though, again, this program is not based on the safety of children. It's based on the high number count, and the information and the facts point to that. Because again, I've been asking for almost 3-4 years for speed humps in my district. And there was a resident, and I wish I could send the email to the councils, because it was kind of explicit that they were very angry to hear the mayor was talking about a speed safe streets campaign, when 3 years ago, when we had speed humps and we requested them in my district, we've been waiting. I put forth a resolution regarding some red light cameras. We asked that, it was told to me that I would get additional support for striping and those things. None of those things really happened in my district. And if you go through the district now where the cameras are, there's still no crosswalk. So again, the Mr. Rizzo's comments about this campaign not rolling out the way it should, that should have spoke to the safety of children, is not evident. And that's the point that we're making. And again, show us the facts, show us the data, and we need to see that information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Helper?
I absolutely respectfully 100% disagree. Ms. Gordon is correct. The language in the RFP comes directly from the state law. That's number one. That's an RFP, by the way. The contract on page 5 under 6A says, prior to installing camera equipment, contractor may conduct an analysis of each approach being considered for camera equipment. Of course, they're going to conduct an analysis. They have to make sure that the equipment could properly go on a pole. For instance, we have zones that we would like to put cameras, but they have wooden poles. Line of sight is important. Geometry is important. The vendor never, ever picks locations. Never, ever, and they never will. That's number one. Number two, during the RFP process, we invited the entire Common Council. Councilmember Wyatt, you came to the first meeting. Yes, you did. You came to the first meeting, council member, of this. We invited the entire Common Council to be part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question for Commissioner Finn we were talking about before. I know you, a couple weeks ago, you referenced working with a consultant. I just want to just make sure so we're all on the same page. So the private, you said that you referenced a consultant 2 weeks ago when talking about different school zones. So the vendor, Census Gatso, did they have anything to do with selecting any of the school zones?
The consultant that I referred to 2 weeks ago was DiDonato and Associates. They're a professional engineering firm who did the sign layout. That is a very separate and distinct operation from the camera layout.
Perfect. So the sign, so when you talked about the consultant 2 weeks ago had nothing to do with Census Gatso, it was specifically to signs related to each zone.
Yeah, the consultant that I was referring to was DiDonato and Associates. Typically, we've been calling Gatso the vendor to differentiate from the professional consultant that we had do the designs.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I've said this twice. I'm going to say it a third time. I don't think this has to be a us against them, them against us. Has to, at the end of the day, be about our children. And we're a body that has the ability, to be very honest, if we wanted to stop the entire thing and have the votes, could. We haven't taken that route, which suggests to me that we are still open to hearing opinion. Now, I don't know if I dropped the ball with Mr. Rizzo or if the commissioners didn't get his email, but the reason I asked to meet with him, number one, he's a constituent. Number two, he did some research. And number three, I don't think we'd be here discussing Mr. Rizzo's proposal if there had been a meeting before this one. Is that still, that door still open, commissioners? Because
absolutely, and I agree with you, and I would gladly meet, as I said, and Commissioner Finn and I talked about this earlier. I would not meet without your honorable body. I think that would be totally disrespectful. I was under the impression last week, as Commissioner Finn was, and maybe you were as well, I don't know, that whether it was yourself, the leadership, a small group of the Common Council, the whole group of the Common Council, Mr. Rizzo, myself and Mr. Finn, and I absolutely would. And I totally agree with you, about the school zone program. We're losing sight of the fact that it is about the children. We're losing sight that it does work, and it is working. I heard a lot today, and I don't disagree with a lot. I think in my opening statements, I made the point that the mayor is looking to do a comprehensive plan. The cameras are one part of it. We've heard a lot of people talk about that, but they are only one part. I don't think it would be prudent to say, let's not do the cameras until we fix everything else. It's one part. We can do many things concurrently.
So, and I'll pick this up. Marcus here from my office. After this, the next meeting, we'll reach out to all three and then set a date, and any council member up under the four, the five, will be able to attend and have that discussion to make good decisions. I think, Commissioner, one of the things that where we get on these calls and they last forever is because I'll give you an example. I didn't know anything about some of the initiatives until I saw it in the media. And so this is where that communication, it ended up spilling out here because of the frustrations that have built, that I think that with a phone call, a sitting down with council members and being able to kind of hash this out and kind of, one speaker earlier said, kept talking about the politics. I want to be clear, this is not about politics for me or the council, it's about government. So there's a big difference when you talk about politics and government. This is about good government, and good government isn't a rubber stamp. It looks at processes, and this council did vote for this. So because we voted for it, there was obviously a desire to work with the program. But I think when it becomes us, them, us, the only one who's going to lose in the end, the only one is going to be our children and the safety of our neighborhoods. And I agree with almost everybody who's been on, whether it was pro or against. At the end of the day, obviously, we have to do the people's work. And the people's work does not always have to be televised. They're waiting for us to come back with solutions, with answers, and not another meeting full of conversation that moves us no closer to the goal. So we will reach out, and Mr. Rizzo, that's my commitment to you. Commissioners, that's my commitment to you and to this council. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have a question for Commissioner Helfer, then Councilmember Scanlon. Commissioner Helfer, we don't have another committee meeting for a couple weeks, so I just wanted to address this now. Are the cameras supposed to be issuing violations starting next Monday, March 1st?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Scanlon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if you'd permit me a question to Dr. Carestis.
Absolutely. Dr. Cresties, are you still here?
Yes.
We have the commissioners reference the crash data, the traffic data, and the overlapping 311 data. And I think Councilmember Farrelletto brings up a good point about the community schools as well. Dr. Cresties, I'm sure you meaning the Buffalo Public Schools, receive complaints at times from parents, guardians, students about safety in and around schools. Have you noticed that the cameras have been installed in areas where you meaning the Buffalo Public Schools, typically receive complaints regarding traffic concerns?
Yes, what comes to mind to me right away is School 54 on Main Street. That is, I myself was going there to observe what the crossing guards had to endure with not only people speeding, but actually blowing through the red light in front of the school while parents were dropping off their kids and trying to walk them across the street. So yeah, and Hutch Tech is another example. When that school is fully operational again in the coming months, there are literally hundreds of kids that are getting off of bus stops or coming from the train station, walking across Elmwood Avenue from Chippewa and other nearby blocks. And it is a community of young people coming to their school. And it can be an incredibly dangerous stretch of downtown on Elmwood. So the speed zone cameras are literally a salvation for those two schools that come to mind. I do remember the question about the community schools is important. I don't know so much now because data was the only consideration when these cameras were put in at the start for this pilot, and that was consistent with how the state law was drafted. But for the future, as cameras roll out, it'll be an important data point to know which particular schools have the most walkers coming. I think that would be interesting. The district will certainly share that. But for now, we just appreciate that the city made the effort to base the locations on specific data related to accidents and incidents. And at least in those two examples that I just cited, I absolutely know that it's living proof that those are valuable assets now to protect our kids.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Councilmember Golumback.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I missed a little bit of Mr. Rizzo and Mr. Reese's comments. My internet connection broke and I had to move to a different part of the house. So I apologize about that. So if this question was already answered, I apologize. But I just wanted to say that, I echo the sentiment of the council president. This council could have had a vote on these cameras and, done something more than what we've done so far. But I think that we have tried to work cooperatively among ourselves with the administration and with residents, both pro and con, because I've received phone calls in my office and emails from people that are vehemently opposed to the cameras and that are supportive of the cameras. I think that it's a very mixed bag from people in our districts. All of us that have been on the council for any length of time know that we've received phone calls for years and years, about speeding in front of schools. I was a supporter in theory of the cameras at the schools for a host of reasons. I remember one of the reasons was that it was going to be cameras that were going to be issuing the tickets. And that way it would take out some of the human error, most of the human error. This was before the police protests and riots and problems that we had over last summer. So, I mean, even before this, we were thinking of a way of being fair to residents so that the residents that would get ticketed would be those residents that went 26 miles or more in a speed zone. Not people that are following the law, not people that are acknowledging that they're in a school zone. And I have to say, publicly, I received 2 letters very early on because I was going 30 in a school zone. And it was near my house. Thank goodness the tickets weren't in operation yet. It was February of last year. And, I said to myself, you know what, I got to slow down. And I try to be responsible, in my neighborhood and in my district. But when I got the threat of getting a ticket, that made me think twice. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but I'm just being utterly and completely honest at this point. I think that there does need to be a 2-pronged approach, as Dr. Karestas said. I think that we need to reward people. I think also, though, that you need to penalize people. You don't have the speeding problems. I live 2 blocks from Kenmore, Tonawanda, and I know that when people are traveling north, they slow down as soon as they hit the city line. Well, why do they slow down? Because they're afraid that they're going to get a ticket. Because ever since I was a kid, you knew to slow down when you went into the suburbs. In the city of Buffalo, these type of traffic infractions weren't high on our list of priorities for whatever reason. And so people got lazy and, sped and drove too fast in school zones. So unfortunately, we do have to do something to retrain people. And anybody that says that, oh, I didn't know that you had to slow down in the school zone is fibbing in plain English. They know that they're supposed to slow down. And I don't believe that they're going to slow down until people start to get penalized. So that was why I supported the concept of the cameras for the school zones in the city of Buffalo. Now, that being said, this comes into my comments of that I apologize that I missed part of Mr. Reese and Mr. Rizzo's comments. What my concern is that I want to make sure that these this camera law is actually legal in the city of Buffalo. I have some questions, and I think that Mr. Reese in particular asked some questions that made me scratch my head. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand the legal nuances. And I would like for our law department to look into this. And, I do have a couple of questions about the length where you have to have the signage and things like that to know that this is legal, because I think that's the key question. If this is not a legal operation in the city of Buffalo, then all of these questions are moot. So that's my main question. I just want to make sure that it is legal, what we are doing, following state law, et cetera. And then I want to end also by saying that I have worked with Commissioner Helfer. I have worked with Commissioner Finn. I met with them. I spoke to them over the phone. I've been a pain in the rear end, with contacting them during this process, not just with the cameras, but with other issues in the district. And they worked with me on Elmwood Avenue for the cameras at McKinley High School. They worked with me at West Hurdle and Grabiar's Academy, where there are school cameras on Hurdle and Military. So, I mean, they were very, very willing to work with me. I reached out. I think I made the phone calls first. I'm not 100% positive at that, but the administration was willing to work with me, and they were willing to work with some of the community groups that I was working with at the time. Unfortunately, in March, when all the COVID crisis hit, that did change things. So, I do want to set this record straight, at least in the North District, that the administration and those two commissioners in particular were more than willing to work with myself and with residents of the North District. And I want to thank you for having this meeting.
Any other questions, comments? If not, then we will move on to the next item.
Would you like to table this item?
Yes, we can table this item.
Motion to table.
Seconded by Council Member Nowakowski.
Item number 5, concerns contractor violating apprenticeship law.
Items open.
This item is open. Do we have anyone here to speak on this item?
How do, Councilman, this is Matt Kent, Foundation for Fair Contracting.
Thank you, Matt. You have a few minutes to speak on this. I know you've been patiently waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the council. Apologies, I know this has been a lengthy one, so I will do my able best to keep it succinct. So Matt Kent, Foundation for Fair Contracting. I've been before you before discussing problems about the city's enforcement of the apprenticeship law. Very quick, broad strokes. The city made a promise to young workers through its apprenticeship law. In August 2020, the foundation alerted the city about Amherst Paving's probable non-compliance and violations of that law. In response, the council acted to mandate Amherst Paving's compliance. I'm here first to thank the council for your action, provide an update, and sadly, regretfully inform that your leadership may be needed once again. So in November, Commissioner Finn came back to the council and he reported that Amherst Paving was indeed violating the apprenticeship law, and as such, as mandated by the council, rejected their bid on the Group 996 Suffolk project. The violations were exactly where the foundation had suggested they'd be. That is the $5 million Group 983 citywide mill and overlay project. That's where the contractor has just half the legal requirements for employing apprentices, where the contractor has not taken corrective action, and where the contractor is claiming compliance through false documents submitted to the city. This is the only time in its 15 years on the books that a contractor has suffered a loss of city work for breaking the apprenticeship law. So have we entered a new period of enforcement? Unfortunately, no. This is the lone instance of city enforcement, and it just so happened to be the one time the council forced it to. Hence, the foundation is struck by the bizarre position the city finds itself in. Amherst Paving's multiple violations on the citywide mill and overlay project were grounds to reject its bid on a different project, but the city has not yet acted to terminate the contract where the violations are taking place. So a month ago, the foundation shared these findings, the same letter that we filed with the council, and we filed it because in our notification to DPW, we requested a meeting to discuss these findings, a request for action. None of this has taken place. So what is all this over? We've got a contractor who has repeatedly shown an unwillingness to meet the city's needs. And I'm not even just talking about apprenticeship. As reported by Commissioner Finn in November, Amherst Paving has completed less than a third of the project. We foiled for a whole bunch of documents on that project, including communications, which help explain the contractor went AWOL. It disappeared for weeks from the project to go work elsewhere outside the city, abandoning the construction schedule, delaying the project. After the city had approved a requested temporary stoppage, Amherst Paving unilaterally decided to take off several more weeks, prompting the city engineer to write them, quote, "Stopping work on the project to complete work outside of city assignments is unacceptable and jeopardizes the standing of the contract."
Matt, I know you were very patient for over an hour to speak, but if you can just wrap this up because we're at the 3-minute mark.
I can do this in 40 seconds. So what happened? The contractor did indeed take multiple additional unscheduled weeks from the city project to work elsewhere. They don't honor our apprenticeship laws, don't honor timely construction for city residents, they don't honor the contract. That's what we bend backwards over. So why hasn't the city terminated the contract? When I spoke to Commissioner Finn in November, he was direct. The difference is that on the citywide mill and overlay, enforcing the law is at his discretion. But on the Suffolk project, the council mandated compliance, and that's the difference. It's becoming clear the administration will not act without council supervision. Thank you.
Thank you.
For running
So
over.
what we'll do on this item is we'll ask the city engineer and commissioner of public works to respond to this I know they just heard this now if they were on this meeting or within a couple weeks, and then we'll resume topic on this. Councilmember Noakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note for the record that some of the infrastructure work that was not done and completed was in my district. So it had held projects up, and I really would like a response from DPW and how we can move forward with handling this. Thank you.
Council President Pridgen.
Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the agenda, and there's an item that we filed and was approved by the council that I filed, the review of these worker training programs and all the apprenticeship programs. I know that COVID hit and we haven't had that review. This council has been very concerned about certain companies and one in particular. And I was just wondering if, I see he's still on, if there was any response so that either it's incorrect, correct, and we don't have to keep revisiting. If it's not, then I think that we need to do something other than receive and file it or table it. And we still don't know, we haven't had a response to know what the next steps are.
Okay, I didn't see the commissioner on my Zoom. If Commissioner,
If I could, Mr. Chairman, this is something that the department is continuing to work on with Corporation Counsel, and we'll be providing a response shortly.
Can I ask the commissioner a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So the info, and I know you're working on it. So this company is still working on contracts for the city?
Well, no one's working right now. It's the middle of winter.
But I mean, we're still allowing them to bid.
I want to be careful with everything that's discussed given the direction that this is potentially going with potential litigation. I'd prefer to discuss this either at an executive session, if that's what your honorable body would prefer, or to just speak individually, Council President, if that's what you'd like to do. I don't want to put the city in a bad position by being on the record here.
Yeah, I think that the city's already kind of, we're confused. We're confused as far as what is the deal. This is the same situation, for instance, that we just had in the last discussion. So we have a constituent that brings some information to us. Then we ask for a response to know, is that information correct? Is it not? If there isn't, and this isn't toward you, Commissioner, I'm going to just voice my frustration. It seems as if over the last month, and every time we ask a question, it's about pending litigation. And if there is no litigation right now, if we don't answer the constituents, it looks as if there is something to hide. The facts are the facts. If the company is still allowed to bid. That's a fact, yes or no. Is the company meeting the guidelines? That's a yes or no. Have we been served for litigation? If we haven't, I guess, and Corporation Counsel, Assistant Corporation Counsel Gordon is on, I guess if we expect it's going to come, we should go in executive session. I'll be clear, this council has been very, very, has not gone into executive session simply to discuss items that we don't have a lawsuit yet or know that one is coming. That was one of the, one of the grading points that we were graded on, that this council by some independent groups does not just run into executive session when it doesn't want to have a conversation publicly. My fear is we're going to keep kicking stuff down the road that needs some answers, that needs some clarity. And some of it is probably pretty easy, and we don't have to be in 2 weeks talking about the same thing. So I don't know how we resolve this, because Mr. Kent has been here before in his organization. There is something filed from 2020 that we're still waiting on the response. So if we go into executive session for this, I'm not sure how it gets resolved, and we just can't answer, is this company in compliance? So that's
Assistant Corporation Counsel Karen Gordon. I believe the position that Mr. Finn is in and is trying to explain to you is, it is not only an issue of whether there is current litigation, but it's current litigation and also what could be the result of his investigation into what the company is presently doing or is not presently doing, right? And from that investigation may lead the city to make determinations or decisions that could lead into possible litigation. And I believe he's trying to say at this point, he does not want to express anything or say anything that may come back in a deposition later, or may eventually have to be used against the city in determining whether or not its decision to terminate, if that's the route it decides to go, a decision to continue what the current contractor is working on, end up being an issue for the city in future litigation. So I do believe if you do want answers, I think the expert, what I'm hearing from Mr. Finn is that he could provide you answers, but he would prefer to do it in a closed session. I don't think there's a problem with that. We could do that. And the representative here, Mr. Kent, could be in that session, and he can have those questions answered. And then you can determine what it is that you want to express once you come out of that closed session with the public. So I don't think there's an issue with that, if that's what the chair would like to do, and if that's what you would like to do as well.
Well, is that right, Mr. Finn?
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Gordon.
So, and thanks. Let me ask this, and then I know we have an executive session on another item, so maybe we can go into the executive session at the end if the chair desires. But let me ask, is there an investigation? Because that's what I'm hearing Ms. Gordon say.
That's accurate, and a decision's not been made.
Got it. So you're investigating something, you will let this council know the outcome?
Absolutely.
So here's what I beg of you in all respect, is that we don't find out about it, and no disrespect to the paper or to TV. I don't want to turn on TV and find out what the results are, because I think that's what ends up happening. And then it becomes a battle instead of just good government, and all tiers of government find out. So I'm okay with that move based on your suggestion, Commissioner Finn, and on the clarity from Assistant Corporation Gordon. I'm okay discussing that in the executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Majority Leader David A. Rivera.
Sorry, I believe you're
Pardon me. We've had conversations in the past regarding contractors not fulfilling their obligations in a timely manner, or not having the capacity to do it. And I remember us talking about how the RFP was framed to make sure that contractors couldn't go to Amherst to do another job and stop doing work on projects in the city of Buffalo. And so they decided to, instead of just giving out to one contractor, they would do multiple contractors, that they do RFPs in a way that would hold the contractors accountable. Now, we've talked about possible litigation. I don't know until somebody files a notice of claim. We're going to ask these questions openly. When they file a letter of claim, then we say, hey, stop. There's pending litigation. But until then, we're going to have these conversations, and people like Kent are going to come before us and tell us that the work programs are not being met, that they're not doing the work that they're scheduled to do. That is unacceptable. Public Works has to put out an RFP that's framed in a way that will not allow this to happen, period. Whether it's work programs, whether it's scheduling, that is totally unacceptable. And I don't want to give them an out. So it should be an ironclad RFP that says you have to do this work within this season and that these programs have to be completed. So I don't want to leave anything to interpretation. It has to be clear in the RFP when they're going out to bid. And I want Commissioner Mike Finn to kind of hold that, not use any discretion, hold them accountable. I mean, we're talking about it's a federal, so we have to do that. But on this side, the commissioner has some discretion. No, this discretion should be, if you're not doing the projects in the city of Buffalo in a timely manner, we're going to pull this contract. And that's what I want to hear from the commissioner. And I don't know if that's where he's leaning, but that's what I want to hear. I want to make sure that my district is getting taken care of in a timely manner, just as Councilmember Mitch Nowakowski mentioned. Part of the work that was supposed to be done was in his district when they went out to Amherst. That's unacceptable to us. And when we do these contracts, I think we need to be a little more careful with the RFP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions from my colleagues, we will table this item and move to the next.
Motion to table.
Seconded by Councilmember Golombek.
Item number 6, special use permit 682 Abbott.
Motion to table items 6 and 7, 8 and 8.
Seconded by Councilmember Scanlon.
Item number 9, inquiry into Buffalo Police Department interaction with bail enforcement agencies, aka bounty hunters.
This item is open.
This item is open. Council President, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was the item that I was told we may need to go into executive session on, and this one actually does. We have been served notice of a lawsuit concerning bounty hunters or a particular incident. And so it has been suggested. So I can hold this at abeyance until you've completed anything else that you might have to pull from the table so that the public doesn't have to go back and forth if you prefer.
Okay, we can do that. The other thing, I did receive a message that BPD was available only until 2 p.m. I just saw that came up in a chat that I didn't see it until now and the meeting started we've been going for about an hour and 40 minutes now. So I don't know if anyone from BPD is available right now, or if we should schedule a special session at a different time. How would you like to proceed on this, Council President?
Well, I think it's more of a legal question. Again, it's clear. What are the laws? What are the policies? And corporate Assistant Corporation Counsel Gordon is here. So because we can't talk about a particular incident, but I think we need the information. And the reason I think we need the information is because this being the legislative body, if we need to create legislation or whatever needs to happen, I think that we need to do that sooner than later. I think there's an urgency.
Okay, so we'll just remove anything from the table and then we'll come to this. So this will be the last item. Is that good with you?
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Motion is to table by Majority Leader Rivera, seconded by Council Member Nowakowski. Next item. I'm sorry, we're going to rescind that motion, seconded by Councilmember Golumback. Motion is to hold in abeyance, seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Take from the table items 13, 15, 16, 17, and 44.
Seconded by Councilmember Scanlon. Item
13, request to speak at Legislation Committee.
Items open.
This item is going to be received and filed. We talked about all of the school zone items previously, so anyone who would have spoke on 13 previously spoke on number 5.
Motion to receive and file.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Item 15, special use permit 572 South Division for tobacco sales in N3E zone.
This public hearing.
Yes.
Motion open the public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Golumback. This public hearing is for a property in the Ellicott District. I believe we have a speaker here on this. Can you pull up the address again? I think it's 572.
You're correct, Mr. Chairman, 572.
Okay, perfect. The speaker, are you here?
Yes, I'm right here.
Okay, if you can give us a quick synopsis of your plans.
Sure. It's on 572 South Division. It used to be a cell phone store, and I want to change it to a smoke shop. It's a very small location. It's about 600 square feet. There's really nothing in the area of that kind of business. And that's it.
Okay, is there anyone else who was here to speak on this at the public hearing? That's still here. Okay, I don't see anyone else. Council President?
Just a couple questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you said what was going to be the use again? Say it again.
A smoke shop.
What does that mean?
That means like it's going to be a retail store selling tobacco and stuff like that.
So this is a store just to sell tobacco?
Tobacco and hookahs and CBD and stuff like that.
Okay, let's have a meeting, okay? Mark from my office will reach out to you. Let's have a meeting on that one. This is a little different than what I thought. And nothing else will be sold in this store except tobacco and hookah and
yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a meeting. I'm not ready to approve this yet.
Motion to close public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Golumback.
Motion to table.
Seconded by Councilmember Nowakowski. Next
Item 16, special use permit 388 Amherst for tobacco sales in N2C zone.
Motion open the public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Golumback. This item is in Councilmember Golumback's district, 388 Amherst Street. I believe Ahmed Hussein is here to.
Yes, sir. Present.
I'm going to give the floor to Councilmember Golumback.
Okay, thank you. I have the same questions that the council president had for the shop in his district. What exactly are they looking to open up here? And what kind of a shop is it going to be?
Oh, we're just going to be pretty much like what the last guy said. We're just going to be a smoke shop that essentially incorporates tobacco, cigars. We're going to have our own CBD line. We're going to have our own logo. We're going to have our Buffalo name coming out to 716 Buffalo. That's going to be the logo. We already have a logo made out and everything. We're going to have our logo pretty much hard printed onto most of our products, and we're going to try to make it into a chain.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very open to this. I know that we've had problems on that corner before with sustainability, not with the businesses that were there, but with the sustainability of the businesses. I'm very open to this. I know a couple of the business people had some questions. So if you could get me your, I think actually Evelyn from my office has your contact information. I would recommend that this be sent without recommendation before we make a decision on it next week after the meeting's over with.
I'm kind of confused right now. So what's going on?
We would not be denying
you're kind of
your
breaking up.
application. We would be sending it to the full council without recommendation. There were a couple of the business and block club people that had some questions that we would like to just simply see answered, and then we will make a final decision next Tuesday. I don't foresee that there's necessarily going to be a problem over there, but there are some people from the neighborhood that had a couple of questions. So I would want to send it without recommendation, and then we'll make that decision on Tuesday based on the discussions that the proprietor has with the business association and the residents.
Okay. Well, if there's any questions that the community would like to ask anytime, I'd be willing to answer. I'd hopefully, get everything situated. I'm just trying to get this done. I've been in Buffalo. I just moved here. I'm just trying to situate myself while I, establish myself here.
Sure. No, completely understood. And I appreciate, that you've spoken to people in the neighborhood. And I believe you or one of your representatives spoke to Evelyn in my office. And that's very much appreciated. So, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It could still be approved this coming Tuesday.
Okay. So I'm not going to get a final answer until Tuesday. And how am I going to get an answer?
Correct. It would go in front, it has to go in front of the full council on Tuesday. Today would only be a recommendation. So whether we said yes or no today, it's not official until next Tuesday anyway. So that's why we're sending it without recommendation. And then a decision will hopefully be made on Tuesday, hopefully in your favor.
Thank you very much, brother. I appreciate your help. I appreciate your honesty. And I wish you a blessed evening.
Thank you. Same to you.
Motion to close public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Golumback.
Motion to send without recommendation.
Seconded by Councilmember Noakowski.
Item 17, special use permit 514 to 528 South Park for primary and secondary school in N2B zone.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Seconded by Councilmember Scanlon. This item is open in the South District. Councilmember Scanlon, do you have anyone here to speak on this item? Hearing none.
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Noakowski.
This is in the Fillmore District.
I apologize. I'm very sorry for making that mistake.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if you can allow the applicant to speak first and then my constituent Nancy Parsi to speak second. Thank you.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Wassel with Elk Development Company. The reference project site is located at the northeast corner of South Park Avenue, Alabama Street intersection. The historic St. Valentine's Church is located on the above reference site. It has been vacant for several years. We're seeking permission to renovate the church and adjacent commercial building into a charter school in an N-2E zone. Buffalo Creek Academy Charter will be occupying both of these buildings. Buffalo Creek Academy Charter is a free public 5th grade through 12th grade grad college prep charter school. It intends to provide and operate a high quality middle and high school option to students on Buffalo's east side. The school will have a balanced, rigorous academics and a student environment with a high level of support and care for the students. The Buffalo Creek intends to encourage active citizenship among their students throughout the implementation of curriculum that approaches civics from a global perspective, on top of the usual literacy education as well the students will receive. And that is all for us. I'll take any questions that Councilman or anyone else has at this time.
Thank you very much. Nancy Parisi, you're the next speaker on this item.
Yes, thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak to you all. I'm a longtime resident and homeowner of a property across the street from the school. My only concern, I have to say, is that in an ongoing fashion, there has not been a whole lot of information available to the neighbors. I know that one neighbor actually thought that these were to be apartments. There's no signage saying anything about, proudly coming to the neighborhood. This will be the school. I first read about it in the Buffalo News and then have communicated with Mitch about it, who's my councilman. My concern is, I know that there have been other concerns with another school that used to be down the street from me on South Park Avenue. Will there be appropriate security in place for the children? I'm not a fan. Another issue that came up at this meeting about those speed cameras. I'm hoping that those will not be installed on my block for this school. Maybe there'll be another way to calm traffic on my block of South Park. Just wondering about security and also parking for the faculty. I do know that they did raise one home for parking for the school. So just as a neighbor, I'm happy to welcome a school into my neighborhood and see school children in that activity. I just want to ensure that the children will be safe and that we'll all coexist happily. Thank you.
To answer the question about security, the whole building will have a security system. We do have on-site parking. We have an existing parking lot that we're restriping to get some additional parking spaces out of. And there also will be a off-street school bus drop-off and pickup area for the school buses and for the parents. So the kids will have a safe area to get picked up and dropped off from in the morning and the afternoons.
So you just brought up an interesting point that I just want to confirm. I know with other schools in the city, such as Narden Academy, there is a lot of bottleneck traffic around Narden Academy in the mornings and then after school. So you are assuring the neighbors, the neighborhood, that this will not be an issue with South Park Avenue?
There might be a little traffic backup, but there would not be anything too major. The charter school is going to do their best to make sure they have a limit their impact on the traffic. There is not going to be as many. There are going to be a lot of smaller school buses, and we have designed the site so we can line up as many school buses as they anticipate using, so none of them go onto the street right now.
Do you foresee most of the school bus traffic? I know that you've shifted the entrance for the school to Alabama Street. Do you foresee that most of that traffic would be on Alabama Street rather than South Park?
Yes, the school buses, if you look at our site plan, they will enter off Alabama onto the drop-off area, and then they would exit out onto Alabama.
Okay. And what is the student population? How many students will be attending?
Currently, they have 60 students in their first year, and they hope to expand it to between 100 and 120-ish for the next school year, starting this fall. And then they have received approval to expand over to about 300-ish students after about their 5th year of operation.
Has this item gone to the planning board, or is it required to go to the planning board?
Yes, we were at the planning board.
I'm sorry?
We were at the planning board, and we were at the planning board at their last meeting, and they approved it to send it to you guys.
Okay.
And do you know if there are anybody, jump in and answer this question. Are there plans to install any of the traffic cameras on that block of South Park Avenue?
It's Councilmember Nowakowski. Do you have any information on whether there's going to be traffic cameras? I think there's only one in your district, supposed to be one in your district. So maybe this one, I don't know.
No, there is no concluding information that there will be a speed zone camera there. At further down on that South Park, I have personally striped with Go Bike, so traffic calming measures are very, very important to me on South Park. So I would like to let the applicant know it is traffic calming measures. Can we talk about that, incorporating that in your adaptive reuse of that, something that is incumbent upon this application and yourself, that you can incorporate traffic calming measures for your school?
We definitely can. If one of your staff want to reach out to us, we can talk about more traffic calming measures in there and how we can incorporate them into our site plan.
Great. Okay. Can you please give my office, after this meeting, give my office a call at 8514138, because right now I would like to just mark it without recommendation so that Nancy, myself, and my staff members, and a few other folks in the Old First Ward can just have, because I did send my staff to look at the plans, but nothing was attached to this item, but it might have been attached later. But I think that we would all feel better if we were just able to look at the site plan and work out all these kinks before we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to close public hearing.
Seconded by Council Member Noakowski.
Motion to send without recommendation.
Seconded by Council Member Golumback.
Mr. Chair, we have 2 items in abeyance.
Okay.
We do have one more item from the table.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Item 44, violations of the city's apprenticeship law.
Motion to receive and file.
Motion is to receive and file, seconded by Council Member Noakowski. We
Item
have,
number 3, traffic concerns.
did this,
Item is open.
this item is open. Did this gentleman ever appear? If not, we will receive and file the item.
Motion to receive and file.
Seconded by Council Member Scanlon.
Motion to revisit item number 9.
Seconded by Council President Pridgen.
Is this the item we're going into executive session over?
Yes, it is.
Okay. A motion to go into executive session.
Seconded by Council Member Golumback. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chairman, at your discretion to resume the meeting.
All right. We are ready to resume.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we have to say what we went into executive session for. Courtney, Ms. Gordon.
Sure, yeah. Just a general idea.
Okay, we were in executive session discussing a specific item that Council President Pridgen has introduced, and there's our understanding that there is some litigation involving the city. That's why we went into executive session to discuss that matter. Now we will resume the public portion of this meeting. Anyone commenting on this item, or are we tabling it?
I would ask that it be tabled based on our discussion that we just had in executive session. And that item, just for the public, was about bounty hunters that we discussed. So I'd like for it to be tabled until BPD gets back to us with the information that was requested.
Thank you. Motion is to table, seconded by Council President Pridgen. Motion is to adjourn, seconded by Council
I
Member.
believe you have another item for Mr. Kent, or did we decide against that? Is Commissioner Finn still there?
No, he's not here. We have a motion. I know you want to stay, Karen, but unfortunately we're adjourning
I'm
this meeting.
sorry.
Unfortunately. Motion is to adjourn, seconded by Councilmember Noakowski.